Ladies and gentlemen, greetings and salutations to you. As always, I hope you are well. Kluger is here, and he is doing more of a talky, discussion-y Grim Dawn video today. And it's been a while since I've done anything Grim Dawn related, and I'm sorry, but here I am. This is the kind of video I generally have steered away from in the past, being unsure as to the value that they bring to the table, as it were, or bring to YouTube. But, I mean, this is some of the biggest news that's come out of Crate Entertainment and Grim Dawn for quite some time. I mean, the biggest change to the meta game and, character builds since ever, because, in case you missed it, two new Masteries, both of the two new Masteries have been announced in recent times, so I thought we'd have a bit of a chat about that. And also, I guess it serves as a little bit of an announcement. I know not everyone keeps their ear to the ground with all the Grim Dawn announcements and stuff that comes out as much as others. People like myself stalk the forums on an almost daily basis and keep up with all the news, where others don't necessarily. So I figured it'd be cool to bring it up and just have a little bit of a chat about what we've seen so far and what they'll bring to the table in terms of new meta, new builds, and all that kind of thing. So let's get into it. So a real quick note, just the footage you'll see probably somewhere around me. I may be in Facecam, registered trademark. This is footage that is just me grinding with random characters. I don't have access to either of the new builds. No one does yet, as far as I'm aware. Sorry, the new classes. So yeah, that's just random footage, so don't stress about that. But yeah, so the two new classes that we have, or Masteries I should say, are the Inquisitor and the Necromancer. The Inquisitor was announced a little ways back. It was announced first, and then the Necromancer just in the last couple of days. So, just a quick note on the announcements, I suppose, because they were pretty interesting. I think the developers may have telegraphed their move more than they intended to when they mentioned that both the Masteries would be coming out of the existing lore or existing factions that we see in Grim Dawn. And when you really think about it and go through a bit of a process of elimination, there really aren't that many that it could have been. I definitely predicted the Inquisitor before it was announced. That, to me, was a more obvious choice. The Inquisitors had a lot of lore behind them. We have Inquisitor Creed from the existing game. And they were always kind of poised as a really interesting group of individuals who essentially attempt to collect magical artifacts and use magical artifacts in an attempt to eradicate sort of the evils of magic throughout the Grim Dawn, as it were, or even before that, just the Empire at large. So that always made sense to me as a Mastery. The Necromancer, by process of elimination, does make sense, because we don't really have that many factions that really came across as having like a specific flavor or specific set of powers. There's the Kimon's Chosen, of course, and then there's the Necromancers, the Order of Death's Vigil, as two main factions that we've seen throughout the game. Now, Kimon's Chosen, we essentially already have access to very similar powers through the Shaman and Demolitionist Masteries, so there was really no need for any Mastery to come out from there, so that really just leaves the Order of Death's Vigil as the remaining option. And this one stirred up a little bit more controversy because the detractors of the Necromancer Mastery were basically saying that it's a very predictable, tropey, mainstream, predictable kind of Mastery choice, because we've seen them so often in the past in other similar kind of genres. The Necromancer is very mainstay in terms of an option for a character class, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, I think, especially knowing the Crate Entertainment guys and what they'd potentially do with it. So those are the two Masteries that we have. I should mention as well, maybe it'll appear in the top corner now-ish, or maybe even above my face, a link to the video that I will be kind of referencing to a certain extent, which was a stream from the Crate Entertainment guys where they demonstrated some of the skills that both these Masteries have. I'm not going to specifically mention timestamps, but if you just want to watch the whole thing, watch the skills in real time and actually what they look like, I definitely recommend having a watch of that. So first, I guess we'll talk about the Necromancer Mastery, since it was the first one shown in the video. It's definitely interesting. I mean, like I said, it was a little bit predictable, and it is a little bit tropey in terms of its selection for a Mastery. But like I said, knowing the Crate Entertainment guys and knowing the lore of Grim Dawn, which I've been really drilling into as of late, the Order of Death's Vigil is actually a really interesting backstory, I suppose. So if you really dig into the previous lore, necromancy wasn't an outlawed practice going way back into the history of the Empire, and in fact, some of the higher ups, I suppose, the leaders and the rich people of the Empire, in fact, employed necromancers to try prolong their lives. They didn't want to die and give away their power. So Urubaruk was the necromancer that essentially cursed all the dudes you see in Old Arkovia and the Arkovian Undercity and all that. They've become spirits because Urubaruk didn't give them immortality. He cursed them with immortality, but their bodies still decay. They didn't heal. Their wounds didn't stitch up. You know, they effectively just continued to decay but couldn't die. So Urubaruk, who you see in a lot of the text and lore stuff, is that dude. He cursed the Arkovians essentially, and then he was of course banished or killed. I think he was just killed pretty much or whatever have you. But then the Order of Death's Vigil was formed to reinvigorate and rediscover the practices of necromancy that were lost with Urubaruk. So when you think about it from that kind of angle, the Order of Death's Vigil and the necromancy in Grim Dawn actually has a lot more of a cool story, because I think of it as this faction trying to regain the power that it lost. So it's kind of cool from that sort of angle. Watching through the skills that were all demonstrated, I mean, again, in terms of a mechanical perspective, it's reasonably predictable. There's raised skeletons, and there's another couple of pet skills that I saw. There's one where you cast at an enemy, and it's like a soul reap kind of skill, and then from there you get a pet that lasts for a little while. From what I could see, none of the pets appear to be permanent. So neither the skeletons or like that Reaper that you can summon seem to stay on a permanent basis. It looks like you have to resummon them. I don't know if that might get a little bit annoying. I'm not a huge fan of pets that you have to continually recast or resummon. Maybe I'm wrong and I missed something there, or maybe it'll feel different once I'm playing it. I know there was a skill in there for like the skeletons where there was a chance on enemy death to renew the amount, resummon a skeleton, so that might make it a little bit less of a burden. But I couldn't see any permanent pets coming out of the necromancy tree, so there's that. And then besides that, I mean, there's some fairly stock standard stuff that you would expect. For example, there's a variety of life drain stuff. There's a few skills that seem to be like to terrify or fear targets. And there's a soul reap skill which just like saps the life out of enemies, and some a variety of debuffs and what have you, all in the cold/vitality damage buckets, if that makes sense. And look, that being said, from the skills that were demonstrated, there were some pretty cool ones as well. Some slightly more funky ones. There was one in particular called, I can't remember what, it was Bone Spikes, or anyway, basically it casts out in a cone and spikes rip forward from the ground and just destroy enemies. It does piercing damage as well, some other stuff. It looks really cool, and it's kind of a reasonably close quarters kind of attack, so that was kind of interesting. And more generally, looking at the necromancy tree that we could see, there seemed to be some skills that encourage a melee approach. So there was one I think called Necrotic Edge, which seems to be like something that imbues your weapons or activates off default weapon attacks, which does nasty stuff, and of course encourages a melee playstyle. And there was another one, I think it was actually a modifier for the Bone Spike skill, which gives you a whole bunch of extra damage and stuff if you're wielding a two-handed melee weapon. So it seems the intent is, to a certain extent at least, offer the opportunity to play the Necromancer as a close quarters melee combatant, which is quite an interesting idea, and I quite like it, I have to say. So yeah, some definitely unique choices or twists on what might be considered a little bit of a predictable mastery choice. A good one too that exemplified that was the Drain Essence skill. So it looked like the default casting range of the skill was like a short channeled burst in front of the character. So it was really quite a short range skill. But even that, just the idea of channeling that spell was a really interesting idea, rather than something like, say, Curse of Frailty, or maybe even off the default weapon attack, just a chance to absorb health or energy off enemies. So yeah, the idea of channeling it was really cool, but then the modifiers for that skill got really, really interesting, because then it's really increased the range of the attack from the default channeled range, which sort of chained out to a much wider group of enemies, and it looked really badass, and was, I guess, not necessarily what I would expect to see from like a Drain Essence skill. You know, my preconceived notion of what it might be and what the guys actually came up with were two completely different things. So yeah, definitely some interesting stuff coming out of the developers from there. And like I said, some have considered it a little bit of a predictable choice, just with the more wider role-playing game genre, but I'm sure the Crate Entertainment guys are going to definitely put some pretty unique spins on it, make it fun to play, make it feel kind of unique, and make it fit in with the existing Masteries. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's going to offer some really unique ideas into the game at large, into the wider thing. Good, yes, nice work, Kluger. So having a look at the Inquisitor now, quite interesting as well. Some really cool stuff coming out of the designs that we were able to see thus far. One thing that caught me a little off guard was its focus on ranged damage, which is kind of good and bad, I guess, to a certain extent. I've never felt like ranged characters needed more help in Grim Dawn. The current meta makes them not that difficult to design or build or have good success with. Nor did I feel like we were lacking in options for elemental damage, but nevertheless, this is what we've got. A really cool thing, though, that they've done with the Inquisitor class or Mastery is offered a skill. It seems that they've offered a skill, level 1 in the Inquisitor tree, that gives you the ability to dual wield pistols. So right out of the gate, without the need for gear, you can do so. So that's a really good choice, because you can dual wield melee weapons right out of the gate with Nightblade, so to do that for a ranged counterpart makes a lot of sense. So that's really cool. And yeah, then as we would expect, it's just really heavily focused on a variety of elemental damages. The main one that got demonstrated was a channeled sort of short to medium range fire skill, which was just a big torrent of flame that came out from the character, and it could be augmented with lightning damage as well. It looks like it'd do pretty brutal damage if you really cranked it up, so that was really cool. There was another one, Stormbox of something or other, the idea of which seemed to be casted at one enemy and then they would have like a lightning aura, which damaged enemies further, like from their radius, which was a really different idea than what we've seen so far. Kind of like Bloody Pox, I suppose, in a way, except lightning damage. So that's kind of interesting. Then there were these auras, which were the exclusive skills of the Inquisitor Mastery, which were, you know, big old passive buffs. One much more offensive in nature, in terms of buffing all the elemental damage types, and I think debuffing enemy elemental resistance, going from memory. And the other one was much more defensive in its nature, offering defensive ability and other such stuff. So yeah, there was definitely a heavy focus on the idea of these runes, which were essentially the conduit with which the Inquisitor sort of summons their power. And there's a few different options there. There seem to be some debuffs as well throughout the tree, which, yeah, are good as well. I mean, you kind of come to expect this with the Grim Dawn Masteries. Most of them have some sort of debuffing mechanic, so to speak. And going through the tooltips as well, from what I could see, there seemed to be some interesting sort of temporary buffs that the player could get, which seemed kind of cool. And there seemed to be one as well where you would like basically cast like a circle on the floor, some sort of like protective barrier which you could stand within. I don't think I saw it demonstrated, but I assume like you'd be able to stand within it to get the buff, and then enemies that enter that area get debuffed or some such. I think that's what it seemed to be like to me anyway, but we didn't actually get to see that skill. The main cool thing coming out of the Inquisitor tree though that I saw was this idea of traps. So this seems to me to be a completely new and unique idea for Grim Dawn skills. So they were casting down these spells, which sat there for a second or two, and then boom, the trap activated and did a massive amount of damage in an AoE. And we've kind of seen it like with the mortar traps from the Demolitionist Mastery, but these seem to have a much more unique flavor to them, because there would seem to be a variety of them doing different things, but just the way they sat and then just triggered regardless of what was around them seemed really cool. And because there's a few different ones, it could be a really fun playstyle, and you could even probably do a full focused trapper build in combination with the Demolitionist mortar traps. Are they called mortar traps? I can't remember. Thermite mines. I'm thinking of thermite mines. and then like mix in stun jacks and stuff, and you could have a really fun, unique way of playing a trapper kind of build. So yeah, the Inquisitor, I was honestly a little bit trepidatious when I heard about the Inquisitor, because like I said, I felt like it wasn't really filling a gap that wasn't already filled in Grim Dawn in terms of options we had for builds. But seeing some of the skills, it does definitely seem to be bringing some more unique options to the metagame for character building, which I guess we'll talk about briefly now. So yeah, I think we've got a lot of cool options coming out of the woodwork with these two masteries, most definitely. There's a range of stuff you could do. I mean, not surprisingly, you add 2 new masteries in. I'm not going to do the math now, but it adds a whole different plethora of build choices that you could make. If we think about the Necromancer, I mean, there's the more obvious choices, which I'm sure we'll see plenty of, which are just straight pet builds with either the Occultist or with the Shaman masteries mixed in. So you just do like an ultimate uber pet build, which, you know, we could kind of already do, but the Necromancer tree seems to offer a lot more, like a greater volume of pets, so no doubt we'll see that. I imagine we'll likely see like a Necro Soldier mix, because there does seem to be encouragement for melee Necromancer builds, so I'm sure we'll see something brutal like that, which would be really, really fun. And I'm quite keen to see that as well, actually. So one particular thing the Necromancer Mastery does, which I'm quite pleased about, is offer more... seems to offer more viability for a lifesteal or an attack damage converted to health build, which I've been trying to do even as we speak with the existing mastery. So it is somewhat feasible, like with gear and what have you, and careful mastery choice, but the Necromancer seems to offer a straight up viable way of doing this, which is I'm really pleased to see, because I felt like it was a little bit lacking with the mastery choices thus far. So despite it being like a fairly, you know, standard fare Necromancer kind of notion or idea, I'm still really glad to see it in the game, because it's something I really enjoyed playing. The Necromancer actually reminds me a lot of the Spirit Mastery from the old Titan Quest days, which had some really cool attack damage converted to health options. So yeah, I'm really stoked to see that, and I think the Necromancer is going to offer some really unique build ideas. Similarly with the Inquisitor, I'm sure we'll see some really nifty stuff that I can't think of. The more obvious ones will be like a straight up gunner build in combination, probably with Demolitionist. In a lot of cases we're going to see. I'm sure we'll see stacks of different builds coming from that sort of direction, because between the two there'll be crazy elemental damage stacking, you know, with Fire Strike and all that sort of stuff, and Flame Touched, and yeah, it'll be some pretty gnarly stuff coming from that mastery combination. That's the really obvious choice. Arcanist definitely not far behind in terms of a pairing there, because that has some good elemental damage offerings like Iskandra's Elemental Exchange, and it's got some good debuffs. What am I trying to think of? Electra's Flash Freeze does a really good fire debuff, so combining that with the channeled fire spell, whatever it was called, if you popped Electra's first and then just fried everything with that Flame Torrent, it would be really good close quarters combination. Yeah, I think actually that might even be a little bit OP just thinking about it, because when you max Electra's Flash Freeze, it does like minus 90% fire resistance on enemies, and then if you just toast them with that Flame Torrent spell, that'd be really nasty in combination. So we'll definitely see that as well. Those are probably the two more obvious choices. Again, off the top of my head, what else could you do? Because it does, like I said, encourage a more ranged approach in terms of weapon choices, but I'm sure there's going to be some really cool stuff. I'm trying to think through the other ones. Again, you probably see like a close quarters, like soldier melee kind of thing that then uses some of the spells, like that Flame Torrent, because it's fairly close quarters, or that I can't remember what am I trying to think of, like the spell you cast at the ground. It has a name, like an area of effect buff. But anyway, like you just cast that, stand in that, and you do your thing within the safety of your aura, as it were. So yeah, look, there's going to be some really nifty options. I think Necromancer might offer some more funky stuff that we'll see, but the Inquisitor will definitely have, I reckon it's going to be some of the strongest builds in the game, at least from what we've seen so far from the spells that we've been able to view from the Crane Entertainment streams and videos thus far. So there you go, ladies and gents, that's just my 2 cents on what we've seen. It's exciting times, I have absolutely no doubt. Like I said, despite some of the very minor negatives to some of the perceived minor negatives, I should say, to both of these masteries. I think on the whole they're going to be really good inclusions. And like I said, knowing Crate Entertainment, they've had a lot of really cool and unique ideas so far, and that's really why Grim Dawn's been so successful. So I'm absolutely certain that their spins on these two masteries are going to be really fantastic and offer a lot more extended play time in Grim Dawn. Really, there's a lot of really cool choices that are going to come out of the woodwork. I'm sure we're going to see the more obvious mastery builds, class combination builds first. There's going to be some really funky stuff too. It's going to be exciting times. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't know how much value I brought to the table here, but at least you know what the masteries will be, some of the options that will be available. So yeah, make sure you go check out the video from Crate Entertainment as well if you want to get a more in-depth look. And I will try to keep you abreast of any further developments in terms of the availability of these masteries and the expansion when they come out. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope to talk to you again soon. My name's Kluger, and you have a great day.